There is no better capitalist than a crooked communist politician. And South Africa has got some of the most crooked communist politicians in the world. Now, this may sound like a bad thing, but in actual fact, it has saved our bacon multiple times, and it looks like it may just happen again. What am I referring to? I'm referring to 3 occasions, this could be the third, where our capitalist politicians claim to be members of the Communist Party, etc., call each other comrade, have stopped South Africa when we are edging closer and closer to a political abyss. This started in the build-up to 1994, the birth of the new South Africa, when our politicians realized that if they followed the route of communism as opposed to free markets, there would not be a lot of money to steal. They might be in power, but they'd have no money. So what did they do? They made friends with business in South Africa, the international world. We played the game. We became a capitalist country. Life went forward. Saved us that time. Saved us again in the state capture era, the Jacob Zuma presidency, when it was threatening to get out of control. And our very business-friendly politicians who rely on the kickbacks and the payments and all the stuff that was printed ad nauseum in the Zondo Commission reports could see that a continued presidency of Jacob Zuma would trash the rand, which would weaken the economy, which would lead to sanctions, which would lead to all kinds of things. And what did they do? Even though he was the president and they would die for Zuma and they would kill for Zuma and all kinds of things, they got rid of Zuma because their own propensity to make money was being threatened by this guy and his bad policies. They got rid of him. Roll forward to our general elections last year. And what happens? The ANC loses their majority, but somehow negotiates the deal, and that's a separate issue. Through the government of national unity, the rand strengthens, business confidence improves, etc. Steal away. The economy's working. You can keep going. Well, the problem recently has become this, and that is that the ANC is very, very used to governing, and they don't even understand negotiating at all. Even though they had less than a majority, they still got their way on everything. Until we got the budget fiasco. And what a fiasco it was. Basically, the choice was a simple choice. It was, we don't have enough money. We've spent all the credit lines that we could get. We couldn't get any more credit. Therefore, we either had to cut costs as a country or raise taxes. Now, cutting costs is quite easy. We've said this many times on the show. South Africa's got some of the most well-paid civil servants in the world. We've got 700 state-owned entities. We've got government at national level, government at provincial level, government at local level. Everyone's got an MEC, everyone's got a bodyguard, and everybody's got a German sedan. A lot of money. Very easy to cut. The choice was cut some of that or increase taxes. So the ANC chose to increase taxes, but not on the people with money, to take it out on the poor. Sort of goes to show where they sit in the scale of their thinking. They couldn't give a damn who pays, as long as someone pays, and that was the easy thing to do. This caused the impasse, as we know, and threatened the future of the GNU. But what came to our rescue? Well, the rand toppled, as we all know, which puts pressure on inflation. In other words, inflation's going to go up because of our imported goods. It means people get poorer. It means all kinds of manner of bad things. Stock markets go down because the stock market liked the idea of the GNU. And what happened? The ANC shopped around to see what was on the other side of the fence. Because, the DA were just making too many demands of them. So they went to their old mates. Now, in my life, I've never seen such a bad tactic as that adopted by the Democratic Alliance, where they said they'll do anything and everything to stop the Doomsday Coalition, they called it, which is basically putting the whole old ANC back together again. The ANC as it is now, dressed in yellow, the old Youth League, now dressed in red, called the EFF, and the state capture portion of the ANC, now dressed in camouflage, called Umkhonto weSizwe. Problem is, when they went to those people, they said, sure, we'll vote for you, just get rid of your president, just get rid of this, do this, make me vice president, etc. The demands were a hell of a lot worse than with its current GNU partners. And as we sit at the moment, it looks like the GNU might survive. Why? Because our corrupt politicians see that without this coalition continuing, without this government of national unity continuing, we are going to get sanctioned. We are going to have the Rand tank. South Africa's got no financial defenses. And of course, the worst of the lot could be big countries, and the biggest of the lot in this regard would be the US, telling their investors that they may not invest in South African bonds, and that would bring the Rand and the country's economy to a standstill. Suddenly, everybody's looking for a way to make it work. And there's never any better financial incentive than this one. On the one hand, you can keep all the power you like with your mates. You can call each other comrade every day. You can do whatever you like, but there's no money to steal. This is what happened in Zimbabwe, to the point that they got rid of Robert Mugabe because there was no money left to steal. There's one last leg that needs to happen, and that is that South Africa has got foreign policy, and we have got onto America's radar screen. And this is making life extremely tricky, because the US has clearly got a lot of insights into South Africa. We can be as critical as we like about South Africa, but it's a very open country. You can find out any bit of information. You can watch shows like ours, get insights into the country that, you know, this is hardly North Korea. The information is available. Our government has thought that those foreigners wouldn't think that an expropriation act is an expropriation act. Well, surprise, surprise, I think it is. They would say that murder rates across the board as high as death rates in war zones, nobody would notice it because they're in other countries. Well, they notice it. Now, as we've said many times, we are on America's radar screen. They are not happy with the policies in South Africa that over the years we've called redress, which look a lot like money for our mates, not really for the whole country. Because let's face it, the best form of redress would be an economy that grows, that gives everybody a job. That's redress. Not giving 20% of a thriving company to some ex-ANC politician who's now a deployed cadre. And Donald Trump stated recently that he's not going to come to the G20 summit because it's in South Africa. And because South Africa is doing all of these bad things that, as per Donald Trump. We've got Expropriation Act, we've got farm murders. Yes, he may be off on some of his statistics, but the point is that we can't defend it because it exists. We do have an Expropriation Act. We do have crazy murder statistics. We do have unemployment of 50%. So when he says this is a country that I don't want to be seen to be in, it's hard to argue against him. This is no longer the country of Nelson Mandela. This is now the country of Gwidi Mantashe, Fikile Mbalula, incompetent leaders that are doing quite nicely for themselves, but not really for the country. Because if they're doing quite well for the country, we would at least be growing our employment statistics, and our economy would be growing. So quite clearly, there's a lot to be said for this. But the real kicker is going to come here. And that is that the one thing that's going to hurt this country really badly is irrelevance. And we are edging ever closer to the irrelevance cliff. That's the thing that worries me the most. What do I mean by the irrelevance cliff? Well, it sits to me in two major places. South Africa has always looked for the Hail Mary to get our economy going. You remember It was the Cricket World Cup. Then it was the Rugby World Cup first that we had here. Then the Cricket World Cup. Then we had the Soccer World Cup. We had all these summits. We once had one of the COP summits. These are that kind of global relevance where big events take place in your country is starting to slide further and further away, because who wants to come to a place like Johannesburg where the city centre doesn't work? The biggest problem that we've got now is with America's pressure, which they're going to continue to bring to bear. There's going to be very, very soon the time when somebody says, why is South Africa in the G20? Now, please understand what the G20 is. This was as a response to the world that was very sort of felt that there was a thing called the G7, which was the 7 biggest economies in the world. They got together and basically decided the fate of the world. And many countries said, no, we need greater representativity. So what happened is that the World Bank convened the G20, which included other countries, as to give them a seat at the table to try and decide the future of the world. They included South Africa. We go back to the mid-90s, South Africa was a top 20 economy in the world. I think at the moment we're 38, we're losing a couple of places every year. So we are only in the G20 because of, let's call it the DEI of the world, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've got to have one economy from Africa in the G20. Well, the problem is that there's already 2 economies, Egypt and Nigeria, that are bigger than ours. They could be included rather than South Africa. And if they become a little bit more user-friendly, and the US starts putting pressure on the rest of the world to say, we're happy to have African representativity, but why are we picking the 3rd biggest economy? It starts becoming expensive. It starts becoming the expense that comes with irrelevance. The other big problem for us could be BRICS. Because as we know, we also got into BRICS on a technicality for the same reason we got into the G20. So what could happen with BRICS? Well, China, India, Russia, Brazil could decide, let's get a different partner. Let's take it to the brink maybe and get Nigeria in as a representative of the African world. Yeah, but not South Africa, because they're just quite difficult to deal with. That will cost money. So what I'm saying here is I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a massive diplomatic shift in South Africa that says, guys, we can't fight the whole world. We could if we were doing well. This was the days of Nelson Mandela where he could walk through the hallowed halls of the world and be this great statesman, making wonderful speeches and following it up with action. Different. But no, we've got a president who lives in Johannesburg and doesn't know that Johannesburg is falling apart. That tries to tell everybody that Expropriation Act is an expropriation act. That says genocide in other countries but doesn't give a shit about a high murder rate in their own country. I think that South Africa has got a tremendous wake-up call. So there have been 2 wake-up calls. The one is that the ANC realized that by holding the line and by kicking its current GNU partners in the teeth, wasn't perhaps such a clever thing if you want to line your own pockets. The next thing we're going to have to realize is that we're going to have to become a lot more relevant in global terms. And at the end of the day, you can only talk about how good you used to be for so long until people would say, how good are you now? How well is your economy doing? Are you growing? And there's only so long that you can blame history for your problems. When people say, okay, I get it, history bad, but how long does that keep you out for? 30 years not enough? Look at what happened to Japan in 30 years. Look at what happened to Germany in 30 years after the war. So I think that we're going to see some movement in South Africa this year, because it has to happen. Because our big saving grace is those politicians want to get their hands on our money. And if we're not making money, they're not getting their hands on it. So I wouldn't be surprised if suddenly the GNU gets back together again and everybody is singing off a similar hymn sheet And we actually see some positive changes. But it comes out of a very deep and dark place, and that is that South Africa is fighting for its very relevance. So think about that for a moment when suddenly you start hearing our diplomats saying more user-friendly stuff. We already see the appointment of somebody like Mcobisi Jonas as our representative to go to the US. Far better choice than somebody like Ibrahim Rasool. Going to be very, very interesting to watch South Africa walk back some of these points that have been so contentious recently. That's where I sit. It looks like it's an ongoing thing. Every week we're going to hear something different, but it looks like they're going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and that the GNU may just survive. I know one company that's not only surviving but thriving, and that is Pace Car Rental. Support them. They sponsor us, keep us on the air. You keep us on the air by subscribing, and if you haven't, please do so. We'll see you again on the State of the Nation update. Thank you for joining me.